Hello, hello, everyone. Sorry, that was a rough beginning. I am pretty sure it is working. So it says, hi, I'm back. It says Min live from the upside down. So Min's actually out of town. And so I have tasked myself with trying to figure out how to use Restream and do a LinkedIn Live. I think that I'm humbled more than anything right now at how little I know about tech. So I hope that everyone can see this, can hear this. I'm going to log on to LinkedIn to make sure that if you're out there, if you just say a comment, give me a hi, hello, who you are, what your name is, that you're out there, you're not on the upside down, you're not gobbled up by a demogorgon. So I'm going to keep this live and make sure that it is actually running. So my name is Beck, and I'm going to be diving into. Sorry, my face is a little bit hot because I was trying to figure out tech. I think this is much harder than I anticipated. Okay, so I'm going to be jumping into. We have a very meaty agenda today. We have a lot that we need to cover, a lot of different things that we're going to cover today. And so anyone who obviously doesn't know the theme, we are going to be covering Stranger Things. We have the season 5, episodes 5 through 7 coming just around the corner. So I was going to do 5 strange things that people do over cold email that can hurt your results. And then I was also going to do 6 Stranger Things themes, buckets, and things that you're going to see in the end. So I'm going to do a very rapid fire round in terms of the Stranger Things part so that you can get the story of what's in the end. So say your name, come in the chat, say your name and what your role is and who your prediction on who is going to die in season 5 if you're a Stranger Things fan, which I'm assuming that you are if you're on the line. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. We have a lot of meaty themes here today, so I'm going to cover very briefly the outline as far as the cold email topics that we're going to cover, and then also the outline in terms of the Stranger Things theory that we're going to cover today. So as far as the cold email, we're going to start with how do you ensure that someone gets the email, the cold email. So only 59% of emails are actually winding up in the primary inbox. So how do you make sure that your prospect actually gets your email? The second thing we're going to go into for cold email is subject lines. How do you get an open if they do, if and when they do actually get the email? How do you make sure that you get an actual open once they do? The third thing we're going to go into is getting them to read it. So actually being pattern interruptive enough to where the prospect reads the email and consumes and doesn't just scan through it and then log out. The fourth topic we're going to go into from a cold email perspective is personalization and relevance. What is the difference between the two of these? How do you tie them together? And how do you use personalization to its optimal ability so that you can get a response from your prospect? And then we're going to finish out with metrics. What are the questions that I should ask my buyer persona based on my specific buyer persona? What's the type of content that I should send them? What is relevance? And what are all the no questions, essentially? What are the questions that I frequently see within cold emails that will prevent you from getting a response, like a leading question, for instance, or a subjective question? So that's the agenda in terms of the cold email side. And we're going to intertwine into this 6 Stranger Things rapid fire theories and what's going to happen in the end. So the first one that we're going to lead off with is who dies, who doesn't die that everyone thinks is going to die, and who actually dies, and who comes back in the end, and who doesn't come back that everyone thinks is going to come back. So that's topic 1. The second topic we're going to go into is a positive hive mind. So everyone knows the negative hive mind within the upside down. So what's the positive hive mind in the picture of that, and how is that going to interplay within season 5 for the conclusion? The third we're going to go into is a bunch of facts. Within the first episode and the second episode, I did a lot of different facts, truths that I believe that are true, relationships that exist. Some people are some people's dads, some people aren't some people's dad that we thought that they were. So that's going to be the third topic, a rapid fire. The fourth, we're going to go into the topic of what they mean by full circle. So you'll notice within the upside down, there was a wall and essentially it was a circle. So what is that and how does that interplay with the colors red and blue? It's a very heavy theme, a very significant theme within Stranger Things. So how does that play and affect the end? The fifth one we're going to go into is, and I'm just going to give a massive spoiler here, the redemption arc of Henry. So I believe for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there is going to be a huge redemption arc for Henry, that he's going to, or Vecna, if you will, and he's going to come back, quote unquote, to the good side. So what is that redemption arc? Why do I think there's a redemption arc? Why do I think that that's key? And then the sixth topic we're going to go into is, how does it all end? Like, I'm going to give massive predictions. So this is going to be the last episode that I do before before episodes 5 through 7. So I want to give my last prediction. Full disclosure, a lot of these I covered in depth on the first episode we did, but I'm going to do rapid fire. I came out with 30 theories in the first episode before season 5 went live, and 17 of them were correct, proven true. 13 of them were alluded to, and 0 of them were incorrect. So I wanted to go into, no big deal, not to brag. Sorry, I'm laughing because I don't think that's a brag at all. I think that, I spend too much time watching Stranger Things, apparently, or Netflix. Netflix, shout out to Netflix. I'm a big fan. So anywho, that is what we're going to cover today. So why don't we start off with who dies? Everyone thinks, well, let's start with this. The Duffer Brothers said that there's going to be a main character death. So there hasn't been a main character death so far when it comes to Stranger Things. How they've essentially gotten around that is they've introduced characters along the way. So Eddie Munson is a great example of that, or Billy is a great example of that. Radio Shack Bob is an example of that, and they've killed them off in the series. Fun fact, actually, Winona Ryder did not want to kill off Radio Shack Bob and walked around the set with the Duffer Brothers, basically lecturing them that they couldn't kill him off because she liked Sean so much. So point being, there is a main character death that's coming, and they've revealed that there is certainly one within season 5. So there's a lot of different theories around this of who people think it is. The most common heavy hitters that I hear is people think that it's Steve, people think that it's Dustin, people, even in the volume 2 trailer, you saw basically Steve and Dustin having a really special moment where they said, if you die, I die, if you die, I die, kind of thing. I've heard Nancy, I've heard Jonathan. I don't believe that any of those people are going to die. So Steve's going to be safe, Dustin's going to be safe, and the main cast is going to be safe. I would say this is I'm more confident about how it ends. I would say I'm slightly less 99.98 confident about this. It's going to be Joyce. Joyce is going to be the main death, and I'll tell you why. So I'm glad that you asked. I'm glad that everyone asked. So Joyce is going to be the main character death for a couple of reasons. Well, one of the rules around death within cinema and within literature is you can't kill someone who's already been killed off. So Max is going to be safe, obviously. Hopper's going to be safe, obviously. And Will's going to be safe, obviously. So none of those 3 can die. The reason that I think Joyce is going to die is, number one, she is the prototype of ultimate good, right? So you see ultimate evil in the Mind Flayer, and then you see ultimate good in Joyce. She is the only character that hasn't had a quote unquote flaw in the series, meaning she hasn't done anything wrong. A lot of people have done the wrong things to her. In the beginning, she was the only one that believed that Will essentially was still alive, and she fought off a ton of people thinking like, she was basically saying like, hey, I believe that my son is alive and that he's in the lights. No one believed her, and understandably so. But she was the first one and the only one that believed that Will was alive, and she suffered a lot of pushback on that, even from her own son. Jonathan was yelling at her in the square. Hopper was yelling at her in the beginning. Like, no one believed her, and she's always the one that's fighting for people. She's by Eleven's side, even though it wasn't her kid when she was in the pool, and she always shows love. So that's why she's going to have to be the one to go. Now, there's an allusion to this, and I predicted this before season 5 kicked off, and I honestly started crying whenever I saw episode 3. I believe it was episode 3 or episode 4 in season 5, because Joyce is having a conversation with Will, and essentially that conversation, from my perspective, was a goodbye conversation. And whenever she parted ways with Hopper, Hopper stopped and he said, "Damn, you're beautiful." And I believe that's because they're going to kill her off. So in that conversation, Joyce's main guilt, and every character, we're going to get into this in topic 4, but every character has something good that they've done, something bad that they've done. They've been good guy, they've been bad guy, and they have something that a truth or something that happened that they have a lot of guilt and shame around, and that they have a negative self-belief around. So for Joyce, her, and we went into this in the first session. I'm just going to keep bringing that up because I was so pumped whenever not pumped, I was crying, but so pumped whenever I saw the scene. Cause I'm like, I think all of this lines up. But Joyce's main guilt is that the things she's guilty about was that she was gone the night that Will was taken, and that she's a bad mom because of it. She said, she was essentially working. So you saw in that scene with Will and Joyce, basically, he comes out to see her and she said, I think about that night all the time. She said, I didn't know you were missing for 8 hours. What kind of mother doesn't check on their 11-year-old son? And then Will counters back and relieves her of the guilt. He's like, this wasn't your fault. And she said, but I come home and what do? I drink cheap beer and smoke cigarettes and pass out on Cheers reruns. So that was the thing that she believes, is that she's a bad mom. Once Will alleviated that guilt and that fear for her, she said the line of, I'm not going to look away this time. I'm not going to look away, until this whole thing is over. And I'm like bawling at this point because I for sure believe that it was Joyce's goodbye story or claim or conversation with Will. I'm sorry. So she is going to be the ultimate death in the end, and she can't come back. I believe that it's going to be a sacrificial death. So any sacrificial death, the character cannot come back. So Eddie Munson, people thought he was going to come back, and then Billy, people thought that he was going to come back too. But both of those were cases of a sacrificial death, meaning Billy sacrificed himself for the group, and so did Eddie in the Upside Down. So they can't come back as characters. So Joyce is going to be the third and final sacrificial death. And it's going to be ultimate good so that everyone else can live. Okay, so that is the first topic. That's the fastest that I've ever done a topic. I'm honestly super proud of myself for that. Let's go into topic 1 for the cold email side. So the first topic I wanted to go into is strange things that happens over cold email, or strange things that reps don't think about. By the way, that's pretty strange. That's creepy right there. You know what I'm saying? He's got a knife too. I'm back in Texas with my family for the holidays, so that's why the creepy nutcracker. So point being, the first bucket that people don't think about is email deliverability. So there's 2 things that really go into this, but the punchline is that your emails aren't getting to your prospects. That's a huge problem, and a problem that very few people look into or address, in my opinion, my experience. And it's one of the most paramount things because it shaves off a bunch of emails at the start. So again, only 59% of emails, cold emails, make their way to the primary inbox. They're either, they go into spam, they go into social promotions, but they essentially only 59. If you were to send 100 emails, only 59 of them make it to the primary inbox. So the first thing I would think about is a data decay strategy and an email deliverability strategy. So let's start with the latter. Email deliverability strategy, essentially what they're doing is the ISP or the inbox provider is they're trying to protect inbox experience with the prospect. So if I get a whole bunch of emails from, some random outside vendor, if I get spammed, I'm not going to blame it on the spammer because there's too many of them to know. I'm going to blame it on the inbox provider. So essentially what the engineers are trying to do is protect that inbox experience. So what they're thinking about, there's 20,000 engineers over at Google. I believe that 19,000 of them are after us within Gmail. And they're trying to identify what are the habits and traits of a salesperson who's coming in blind from the outside when they don't know someone, so that they can filter those out. So I almost think of email deliverability like a diet. Nothing is usually permanent, but it's a group diet for everyone on your team and over time. So if I do 3 things really, really bad, but I have a really good email deliverability habits and email quality habits over the next couple of months, you'll see it start to recover. Excuse me. But the other thing to think about is it's as a team, meaning if I do something that's really, really negative, it's going to affect 11 and it's going to affect Hopper and it's going to affect Joyce. If Joyce says something really positive, it's going to affect Dustin and Lucas and me. So essentially it's as a team, what are your deliverability habits, or what are your email habits? And there's 2 sides of this. The first side is the technical setup side. So I'm going to rattle off a couple of different acronyms that I would look up if you haven't thought about an email deliverability strategy. So the first side of the house is certifications, essentially. So I look into DKIM, DKIM, SPF, and DMARC if you do or don't have those. And I'd also look up for, look to see if you have a custom tracking link. That's a really important one. So what a custom tracking link is essentially when sales engagement providers, and they're not necessarily the bad guy, but sales engagement providers, they're going to lump you together from a sending domain perspective with other customers. So that's kind of like I'm trying to lose weight or our household is trying to lose weight. And hypothetically, the eating habits of our neighbors are tied to us as well. So they might be good, they might be bad, but they're not isolated. So developing a custom tracking link from a sending perspective ensures that essentially you are responsible and you are accountable and you get the rewards, the benefits, and the drawbacks for your own email, cold to email habits. So custom tracking link, DKIM, DMARC, SPF. If you have anything less than a 50% open rate, then you have an email deliverability problem for sure. 15 to 25% is the normal, is industry average in terms of email open rate. So the vast majority of people do have an email deliverability problem because, again, they're after looking at all of the habits and all the things that a person does and says whenever they're emailing from the outside. If you have anything less than, I would say, 3% open rate, you might want to look into blacklisting. So essentially what blacklisting is, and there's not one central blacklist, but I would think of it almost from the federal perspective of like you have your side of the house, meaning what are your sending behaviors? You have the prospect side of the house, meaning what are their reactions to your sending? Do they block you? Do they mark you as spam? Do they unsubscribe? Do they move you to another folder? And then you have kind of the federal perspective of enough people or enough ISPs have identified spamming behavior. And so you're going to end up on a blacklist. There's multiple thousands of blacklists out there. And there's also a couple of tools that will help you identify if you're on a blacklist, but that's less than 3% open rate. And I would look into if you're blacklisted. And then from the technical setup perspective, DKIM, DMARC, SPF, and a custom tracking link. If you don't know what they are, it typically means that you don't have them. So you would only know about them if you have them essentially. But I would, if you're with an ops, and I would just do a cursory search. If I was not an ops, I would go to my ops leader, sales ops leader, and find out, hey, do we have all these set up? So if you have a sales engagement provider in the box, it means that you haven't set up a custom tracking link. So that's kind of the technical side. And that's about 50% of email deliverability. The other 50% of email deliverability is behaviors of the team. So essentially, you either you gain points or you lose points from an email deliverability perspective. So you can gain points by if someone moves you from another folder, if they save you for their contacts, if they forward, if they reply, you gain a certain amount of points from a credibility perspective. And then you lose points for a certain amount of things that happen. So if someone says unsubscribe, or they say block, or they delete you before opening, that's going to be a double doozy. So those are two of the buckets of how you gain and lose points. From the behavioral perspective, there's a lot of different things of how they identify that you essentially are being a quote unquote spammer. So I'm just going to start rattling off some tips. Again, this is going to be rapid fire style. So less links, the better, for sure. If you have a email signature and it has, your phone number, and it has the website, and it has a link to a webinar that you're just stacking up reason after reason after reason of why it shouldn't essentially be delivered. So there are some links that make hurt you more from a deliverability perspective than others. Meaning, if there's a 404 on the other end of it, they're going to fast track it and they're going to essentially block it from being sent. Meaning, if it's a broken link, any kind of shortened links are going to hurt you. Things will help you from a linking perspective is if you're linking to a verified site, then that will help you. But all of them, I would almost think of them like dessert. All of them hurt you. Some just hurt you more than others, right? So like all of them essentially make an inbox provider, service provider nervous. So I think about it almost like if you have a kid, if you have let's say you have, I'm thinking of my niece. If you have a daughter and she's 15 years old, 16 years old, and they want to go out on a date with someone, all of them make me nervous. Now, there are some that make me more nervous than others, but all of them make me nervous, right? Because essentially what you're ensuring that the prospect does is you're encouraging them to click on a link that takes them out of the house, out of the inbox, essentially. So I would think about your links. How many links are you including? Are they necessary? For sure, I would trim all that crap out of the signature. meaning, even your website, especially if I would look at the stats I'm always going to fight for. If something's working, don't change it. Meaning if you have a request a demo button, let's say, and you're booking lots of demos or inbounds from your calendaring link within your email, then I would keep it. But I would always think about each one of these essentially. Sorry, I was getting a cold call right now. Each one of these essentially that they are a tax. So that's the first part, is links. No more than 50 emails a day for sure. Subject lines that are the same are going to kill you. So even if I send out a subject line that's the same to two different people, even if they're at different companies, it's going to hurt. Because why would you need to send two subject lines that are the same? That's not an internal or high priority behavior, essentially. If I know someone, I'm usually not, and I'm talking to them one-on-one, it's usually not gonna have the same subject line. Even if it's between two reps. So let's say that you build a cadence or a sequence, and within the subject line, two different reps are using the same subject line. That's going to hurt you, because you have to keep in mind that they are marketing essentially as the behaviors as a team and as a domain. So subject lines that are the same are going to hurt you. You can do images, but no more than 4. There's a list of words that I can put in the chat that are going to hurt you. And the more of these words that you use, the worse off you are, the more likelihood that you're going to be spammed. So anything with free is going to be a heavy hitter. Following up is really going to hurt you. Any 100% discount, click here, problem, solution, increase, decrease. So some of them I would have guessed, some of them that I wouldn't have guessed. But anything that you typically see in a marketing campaign, SEO optimization, that you're going to get flagged. So the more of those words that you use within the body and the subject line, it's going to be the worse of, you're going to increase the likelihood that they're not going to deliver it. So no more than 50 emails a day. I wouldn't send them all at the same time, for sure. I wouldn't batch out 40 emails. I wouldn't batch out any emails essentially, in tandem. I had a rep who did that once. He came to my desk and he said, before I say this, I want to know if you're going to fire me. I'm like, depends. What'd you do? He's like, I sent a lot of email. I'm like, how many's a lot, Brendan? Several hundred. And he got locked out of his Gmail, and he thought I had already fired him for doing that. So pretty funny story. But the point is, if you send out a lot of emails at once, if you send out multiple emails at once, again, they're looking for non-human behavior. So sending out 4 emails all at the same time is non-human behavior. So I would try to make all of them include some level of brief personalization, which we're going to get into one of the topics, but no more than 50, not all at the same time, and not at equidistant times. So let's say 1, 105, 110, 115, 120, 125, et cetera, et cetera. They're reading it and they know it's a pattern. So their patterns are easier to read than you think. Even a personality is defined as a pattern of interactions. In personality disorder, there's 10 in total. It's just an abnormal pattern, but there's always a pattern. So these engineers, and that's their whole job, is to study the behaviors that we do and what we say and how we act whenever we're trying to mass blast and spam people at large. So that is, so I would think consider that within your email deliverability strategy. I'm going to be very brief, and then we're going to jump into topic 2 on Stranger Things. For data decay, essentially what data decay is your the quality of your data, meaning is it accurate? Is the accurate email? Is it the accurate phone number for the person that you think that it is at the company that you think that they work at? It decays on average 2.5 to 3.6 per month. So, and the more that you send out with bad data in there, the more likelihood that it's going to hurt you with it from a deliverability perspective. Not only the time waste that's going to be there, but if you don't have a data decay strategy, I'm not going to go into the particulars right now, maybe in another episode, another time when I have less to cover. But essentially, if you don't have a data decay strategy, I would look into it. When reps complain about this, I think it's one of the few things that not one of the few things, it's valid, meaning they have to spend a lot of time looking through these leads. And what can happen a lot of times is they just don't call on marketing leads or webinar leads or any of that because they have the wrong email address. So I would sit down with your marketing team and iron out a data decay strategy. So that's bucket 1, is email deliverability, data decay. Think about it, live, breathe, and eat there first before you even talk about quality. Because again, if you're sending 100 emails, 41 of them are being shaved off right off the bat. So that's, if you were to focus only on one of two things, email quality or email deliverability and data decay, this one for sure would give you more results to the positive. So I would think about that strategy and go through that strategy and iron out that strategy with your peers around you. Okay. Second, Stranger Things theory. Again, I'm going to be very, very brief and very, very light. If you want more details, go into episode 1 and 2 where I go nerdy. I think people think I'm joking when I say that I'm a dweeb or when I say most things about myself until they meet me and they realize that all of it's true. So the second topic I wanted to blow up is I believe that there's a positive hive mind happening within Hawkins. So essentially the hive mind in the upside down is essentially just a vine system that connects the mind flayer with through the upside down. And the strength of the hive mind essentially is how spread out is it and how much is it communicating with one another. I definitely believe that there is a parallel to that. There's a positive hive mind. And what that is all the kids in independent parties. You'll notice that like in every single season, they're completely in different locations on completely different teams, but working for the greater good. So the positive hive mind is essentially all of the kids and all the people, the main cast working together, talking to each other. So a big theme is walkie-talkies, is how much are they talking and communicating back and forth with each other, and that the kryptonite to that positive hive mind, essentially what hurts them the most is when they aren't communicating. So you saw a number of different times in every single season where they say, oh, this person turned off their walkie-talkie. In season 5, Dustin and Steve have always had a wonderful relationship, but all of a sudden they're fighting. And we're going to get into essentially why. And they're like, hey, they're in the van with Jonathan. And Jonathan was like, no talking. And Steve was like, for the first time, I agree with him, no talking. And that I believe is a little bit on the nose for the Duffer Brothers, in my opinion. But I think they're needing to bring it up aggressively because they're going to stick the landing in the end. That the theme of Stranger Things, so the theme of that friendship is not that they're always good. It's not that they always do the right thing. So a great example is they say, friends don't lie, but then every single one of the friends lies to one another in the entire series. So being friends and being in a relationship is not about being perfect. It's about when you do mess up, do you go and do you say you're sorry? And do you make that restoration happen so that the relationship can continue? So I believe the positive hive mind that's going to be outlined within season 5 essentially is everyone in different locations working together, just like the negative hive mind that's within the upside down with the bind system. So in this entire series, what I love about it is you have a counterparty to everything. So you have, positive hive mind, negative hive mind flayer, Joyce Byers, ultimate evil, ultimate good, essentially, which we're going to get into who the main bad guy is. But that is the second prediction that I have, is that they're going to key in on that, that they always need to communicate and they always need to talk, because that is how they can progress forward as a group. Okay, second topic in terms of cold emails, subject lines. Okay, subject lines. They're actually relatively simple, in my opinion. I actually don't. It's so funny that everyone thinks they're like, hey, good email today. And I actually don't write our emails. Min does. Shout out Min. It says that I'm in today. But essentially, when I'm thinking about a subject line, you have to keep in mind a number of things. The first thing above all that you have to keep in mind is it has to be pattern interruptive. Meaning you can't use any of the words that most people use within subject lines for a number of reasons. The first is from an email deliverability perspective. If you use lines like a salesperson or words like a salesperson, then you are a high target for them not delivering it because it's from a salesperson. But the other one is you communicate a certain amount of things to your prospect in the subject line and the pretext where they can tell this is a sales or marketing email. So a couple of things that I would think about, I would go to your spam folder. And I'd also look through your email and through your LinkedIn. And when you're clearing things out, meaning when you delete something, when you knew something was a marketing email, when you knew something was a sales email, stop for a second and just ask yourself, why? How did I know that? And you'll start to get to see the trends. Most of what I study, people are always like, what data bed are you married to? And I'm married to a lot of data beds, but the number one that I am married to, the number one that updates me and helps me, quote unquote, upskill as a trainer, is I pay close attention to the patterns in the market. What are the lines that everyone is using? What are the ones that everyone is saying? Do you want to roll the dice or do you want to hang up now? This is a cold call, but it's a well-researched one, or I called for a specific reason. Like, I look at all those patterns so I know what to blow up and I know what to go outside of. So anything, if it's said multiple times, it might work in the beginning, some kind of gimmick, but then over time, it's not going to work anymore. We're going to go into an option of how you can evergreen be pattern interruptive without a gimmick. But essentially, when it comes to the subject line, it doesn't even have to be good. I wouldn't even look through it in the lens of good or bad. It's just, is this normally said? If the answer is yes, then you've got to get rid of it. Meaning, if it's a normal subject line, if it looks quote unquote normal, and some of the people that I've worked with in the beginning, they're like, well, I wouldn't send the subject line that I pitched to them. They're like, well, I wouldn't send the subject line. I'm like, well, no one would. That's kind of the point. Right? So there are a couple of rules. Whatever you say in the subject line has to link to the body. So you can't just say like free puppies and then it doesn't link. So you'll notice within every, and I'm so proud of Men. Men has become hell of a writer. When I look at his subject lines, they've gotten better and better and better and better and better. But one of the rules is it always has to link to the body of the email. Otherwise your prospect feels duped. They essentially feel like they fell for something or fell for a gimmick. So whatever it is, it has to link to the body. So I think the one for the Stranger Things episode that we did was this one is strange, but it was 001 after, quote unquote Henry, but it was this one is strange. So it linked to Stranger Things and 001, but it has to be pattern interruptive. So I would look at your subject lines and ask myself one question: is it normal? Is it a normal subject line that you see every day and that you could see a rep totally sending? And if the answer is yes, then I would say that the answer is you have to rewrite it. Okay, so that is subject lines. Stranger Things theory number 3. Man, I am cooking. Did you say like how I said cooking? My sister has 4 kids and they're like, Aunt B, we need to update your vocabulary. Cooking, cooked. I'm like, goodness, where are we going? Okay. Stranger Things bucket 3. Random facts that we covered in episode 1 and 2 that I want to call it again. Again, I had about 30 theories. 17 of them came true. One of them was that 8's going to come back, for instance. But then 13 of them are still yet to be capitalized on. So I wanted to give a couple of facts. The first one that I believe is that Dr. Brenner was 000. So Henry was 001, 11011, 8008, and that Dr. Brenner is 000 because he was the first test subject. His father essentially went on essentially was the first one to go to Dimension X, and he wanted Dr. Brenner to carry on his work. So I believe that he is, which is all gone into in the first shadow. If you haven't seen the first shadow, which is the origin story of Stranger Things, you have to. I like how I'm like super convicted about this. You must, because there's so much in there that's coming back within season 5. So Dr. Brenner's father essentially went to Dimension X. And when he came back, he was the only one to survive along with a Russian scientist. And the Russian scientist ran off and took a whole bunch of equipment and put it in a cave, which is where you see Henry. He accidentally touches that equipment, goes into Dimension X and gets the mind flayer within his body. That's the first time that he touched that equipment. So when you saw him scared of that cave when Max went in there and accidentally not knowing, it's because that is the point where basically his entire life changed and where he lost his innocence as he touched that equipment and all of a sudden he had mind flayer within his body. So Henry wasn't all bad from the beginning. He wasn't, at all bad in the beginning, which we're going to get into. But essentially that is one of the facts is Dr. Brenner is 000, I believe. The second one that's kind of a big blow up is Dr. Brenner, I believe, is Henry's dad, 8's dad, 11's dad, and Nancy Wheeler's dad. Spicy. So all of the kids within the lab, essentially, there was 20 kids that were within the lab with Dr. Brenner, and kind of like I was talking about, there's a mirror to everything. I believe that Henry, he, has 20 kids just like Dr. Brenner. He thinks he's so much better than him. Like he's the monster, he's the bad guy, blah, blah, blah. But then Henry does the exact same thing. He's wearing the same vest with the same pocket watch, with the same look, and he walks the exact same way with his hands behind, his back, just like Dr. Brenner had, but essentially, all of those kids within the program, what they had in common was they were infused with Henry's blood. How 8, 11, and Henry were different is that they all three had Dr. Brenner as a direct father, I believe. You know that Terry Ives is 11's father, but you don't know, or mother, but you don't know who her father is. 8, who her mother was roughly, that she was based in London, but you don't know who her father is. Henry, the reason that I don't believe that it's Victor Creel is because, well, first of all, how would Virginia Creel have known that she wanted Henry to basically go be with Dr. Brenner? How would she even known Dr. Brenner if that hadn't happened? So Victor Creel went off to war essentially, and I believe in that time period that Virginia Creel with Dr. Brenner, and then had Henry as a son. So the thing that Virginia Creel is afraid of, so whenever Vecna or Henry comes into someone's mind, all they do is take a self-belief and he mirrors it back to them. Max thinks that she wanted Billy to die. He mirrors that back to her. Chrissy thought that she was overweight. He mirrors that back to her. So Virginia, what Henry used was spiders. And I believe that's because she has shame around her son, because she knows that it's Dr. Brenner's son, but Victor Creel doesn't know that. So she's the only one that essentially knows that. So that's why she's quote unquote ashamed of him. And he didn't do anything wrong, of course, was because no one knows that deep down that that's actually Dr. Brenner's son, not Victor Creel. So when they go to when Nancy and Robin go to the prison, and they see Victor Creel, and then later when they're talking to Henry, Nancy's going to Nancy, or Henry basically, or Vecna sucks Nancy up and goes into her mind. He says, "How is old Victor?" He doesn't say, "How is my dad?" You never see them call him your dad. Nancy Wheeler, I'm not going to spend too much time there, but I do not believe that she is blood relatives, full blood relatives with Mike Wheeler. I believe that Ted Wheeler had Mike Wheeler and Holly Wheeler, but Nancy Wheeler, her mom is obviously Karen Wheeler, but her dad is Dr. Brenner. She's the oldest. Ted was a lot older whenever they got married. And there's a scene in season 1 where essentially Mike is talking to 11, and he says, and he's trying to ask her out to the snowball dance. And he says, "You could go to the snowball dance with me." And they start talking about basically Nancy, and he's like, "Yeah, you should hang out with Nancy. Nancy's like your sister." And then so 11 asks confused, she goes, "So you're my brother?" And he goes, "No, your sister is Nancy, but I'm not your brother." And it's because that's correct. You have to keep in mind, everything is foreshadowing within Stranger Things. So I believe that that's correct. Nancy and 11 are half sisters because they both share Dr. Brenner as a dad. 11's mom is Terry Ives. Nancy Wheeler's mom is Karen Wheeler. And then Mike and Nancy are both half siblings because they both share Karen Wheeler as a mom. So Nancy and 11 are half sisters. Nancy and Mike are half siblings, but 11 and Mike aren't connected from a family tree perspective, because 11 has Dr. Brenner and Terry Ives, and then Mike Wheeler has Ted Wheeler, and then Nancy Wheeler. So that is a huge theory. The last one, and then I'm going to transition, is I believe for sure that Murray is a Russian spy, or he was originally. He speaks Russian. There's an elephant mask in his house, which is a torture device that Russians use. But again, you have the good picture, bad picture. You have the reverse of everything in the series, if you take notice. So you had Yuri, which was on the Russian side, who was a spy, who was essentially what was bad, but then turned good and started helping the group. And then you have Murray, who is a Russian spy as well. So I believe in the beginning, whenever Barb's parents hired Murray they didn't know that he was a Russian spy. So over time, you don't necessarily, if you're a spy, you don't know who else is essentially else is a spy. So I don't believe that anyone else knows that about Murray. And I believe that once he started working for the king, like working with the team, he changed teams, but basically didn't tell anyone. But that is one of the theories that I have, is that Murray's a Russian spy, and that Ted Wheeler is a U.S. spy. So he's always seems completely unaware of things. He seems like he doesn't know what's going on. But then there's several times where it's mentioned that Ted told someone at work that they had a Russian girl in their house, or yada, yada, yada. Whenever Dr. Brenner comes over and he says, you know, he was like, can we come in? Karen Wheeler says it basically is fighting it. It doesn't trust them. But Ted Wheeler is like, come on in. We're all patriots in this house. And they say, we think that there's a girl here. And he goes, oh no, is she Russian? Because he's trying to signify to them like, hey, I'm Team US, hypothetically. So I think that that's going to be revealed in the latter half of season five, that Murray and Ted Wheeler are both spies, just for quote unquote opposite camps. Okay, back to email. So the third one is the first one we covered is email deliverability. The second one we covered is subject lines. The third one I wanted to cover was getting people to read it. So the stats aren't pretty at each one of these junctions. It's a matter of diagnosis to figure out which piece did you lose them at, but it's not pretty at any of these. Even when people log into an email, the statistic I've seen a couple of statistics, but it's somewhere around 9 to 11 seconds that people spend reading an email. So some of the powers that be will say like, okay, so you need to optimize for that 9 seconds. I'm like, that is not my takeaway. My takeaway is it's only 9 seconds. So you need to do something that changes it from they spend 9 seconds to they spend longer reading it. So essentially what people are scanning for when they're looking through an email, they're trying to figure out one thing right off the bat is a sales email. So the more words that you hit that are common, which I'm going to rattle off in just a second, then it allows them to look at it and say like, oh, this is a sales email, and then you're dead. They log out. So essentially there's a number of different reading patterns of how people read emails and read websites. There's a number of different studies that were done on this. One of the myths is that the F-shaped email is the best. It's actually statistically the worst. It increases scanning, but not comprehension, essentially. But is essentially out of all the reading pattern is caused by how much they trust you, how much value you're building, and do they know you beforehand, essentially. But no matter what the pattern is, essentially the first line is going to be paramount. So even in the F-shaped pattern, there's spotted, layered cake. They put on eye goggles, which is really interesting for losers like me. And they study where people's eyes look on an email. That's essentially what an eye tracking study is. There's a number of different patterns, but essentially the punchline is in all case patterns, the first line is very important. So I would argue first half of the first line and second half of the first line. So when you're thinking about the construction of an email, the first thing I would think about, the first thing that I would think about is length and bodies of text. I would say 3 to 4 lines max, not paragraphs, lines. Every paragraph should be 1 line in specific. Acronyms are your friend. So again, getting someone to read something, getting someone to pay attention to something. When you're walking down the street, there's 1,000 different stimulus that are in front of you. Colors, sounds, birds are chirping, someone's in the background. What does it smell like? And your body can't absorb all that stimulus. It just simply put would implode. So what your brain does is essentially when it's walking down the road, it's categorizing things of, does this thing look normal or does this thing not look normal? So I need to pay attention to it. So essentially what your brain, from a systemic perspective, you have a reticular activation system, which is basically a bouncer that sits at the bottom of your brainstem, and it's absorbing information through that lens only. Have I seen this before or have I not seen this before? Because if I've seen this before, I know if I need to fight or run away from this thing, stay put, and fight it, or whether I need to do both, essentially. If something's abnormal, that's something that I have not come to that conclusion yet. Right. So you see someone, you see like a bird, flying in the air. Your body already knows from a pattern perspective that I don't need to change my course of action because of that bird. or the sky's blue. And I'm like, that's normal. So your mind essentially doesn't even register it. So a great example is alarms versus ceiling fans whenever you're asleep. So a ceiling fan is consistent, right? It's just round, round, round. So anything that is a consistent noise, your body knows that it's not going to hurt you, so you can stay asleep. But an alarm, even if it's the volume's not that high, it's like, wait, what's that? I never hear that noise, right? So people break in, and all of a sudden people wake straight up. It's because their brain is like, you need to pay attention to this thing. So that REC essentially, RAS is REC is a great band, not reticular activations. So go look up the RAC, but the RAS is sitting at the bottom of your brainstem essentially is instructing your brain what to pay attention to. And so again, anything that's abnormal, your brain will force you to pay attention to it. Anything that's normal, whether it's good or bad or what, like the sky being blue isn't necessarily good or bad, it's just normal. So my body says like, oh, you don't need to pay attention to this. Or if someone's, 6 foot tall, my body says you don't need to pay attention to this because it's quote unquote normal. If someone's 7 feet tall, your head will literally take you there to evaluate, because your brain is training. It's very, very smart, whether you're feeding the stimulus or not. Is your body is a very interesting organism that was built with a heck of a lot of detail how it operates, but especially from the brain perspective. Fun fact, the brain is not a muscle. Muscles are based on the ability to contract. So doctors don't even know what to call it. It's just stuff. Essentially, but your brain is trained to pay attention to what is abnormal. So when you're thinking about how to get someone to read an email, anything that's going to be abnormal is to your favor, and you have to clean up the aesthetic to where it's readable and it's short. Any long blocks of text, people will tune out. There are a lot of different studies, which I'm sure that a lot of people have seen, of like they keep the first word and the last word the same. By the way, I know we're about to be up on the hour. I hope that everyone can stay on the line, because I still have some doozies to go into. But if you can't, we're going to send out the recording. But if you can, stay on the line. I'm going to sum it up with the next 15 minutes. But essentially, getting them to read it. Acronyms are your friend. Punctuation is your friend. Short text is your friend. Any personalization is going to be your friend. And it has to be pattern interruptive enough throughout the email. So no long blocks of text. Punctuation is good, especially abnormal punctuation. And acronyms. And so anything that stands out from a system perspective is going to help them read through it. So that's why you'll see in my writing, even though it's probably annoying, dashes, ellipses. I do a lot of subject lines with ellipses, is because it's abnormal. So it gets people to stop and pay attention to it. Okay. Fourth one I'm sad that people are going to have to go, but I have to go through these. Okay. Fourth one. Stranger Things theory. One thing that's wild, and you should go look back at it, everyone in every single episode is always wearing red and blue. Actually, that is how what finally cracked open for me of what it was all about. Everyone is always wearing red or blue. Red means they're acting in their good. Blue means they're acting in their bad. But everyone is usually wearing both. Sometimes they're wearing all one color, but it's a representation of their bad guy at that point. So like Nancy in the beginning, when like the very first episode, when she shuts the door in Dustin's face, when he tries to offer her pizza, she's wearing all blue and a blue phone. Go and look back. Every single freaking outfit, red and blue. And so what they are essentially, that is what finally, I had studied this series. I had watched each season 12 times over. I kid you not. I put it on in the background whenever I was doing DAX. And the Duffer Brothers are freaking brilliant, because you do not even notice it. But how I was trying to, the reason I came across it is because I was trying to pick up on a pattern, and my brain is not a lot of things, but a pattern detector is one of them. So I was like, what is the pattern? I know that it's a red and blue thing because I'm seeing it over and over and over and over and over, but I couldn't figure out, is red good or is blue bad? Or vice versa. And the reason is every character at different points is wearing both. And then 30 minutes before I went into the first session for this, I was like, holy, all the characters are wearing both. Meaning everyone can be good, everyone can be bad. Everyone can look to understand someone. Everyone can just judge them and say Eddie Munson's the devil and Hellfire is a cult. Everyone has that villain arc and has that hero arc. You know, like Nancy in the beginning was, you know, she was like, Barb, you can go home. Nancy in the end, she's fighting for everyone. Steve Harrington in the beginning, he was, you know, writing stuff about Nancy on, or his friend was on a movie head. And then at the end, it's like Steve is so helpful. Murray was a Russian spy. All of a sudden, he's super helpful. Hopper was drinking and going out and couldn't remember stuff. And he was like, I'm a cop. I can do whatever I want. And at the end, he's helping everyone. Every single character has had a dramatic shift. And I believe what they're trying to communicate is two things. Number one, everyone has that capability to be good and bad, and that you have to go full circle. So the reason that that wall is full circle, by the way, I believe that wall is going into Dimension X. You have Dimension X, Upside Down, and Hawkins. Dimension X isn't bound by time. Upside Down is bound by time, but only one, November 6, 1983, and Hawkins is ongoing time. So to get into Dimension X, which I was going to cover in the end, but essentially the punchline of why the Mind Flayer, what the Mind Flayer is trying to do, is the Mind Flayer is locked away in Dimension X and can't get to these other two worlds. Henry was in Hawkins, but when he got pushed through his Vecna, can only access Dimension X and Upside Down. 11 can only access Upside Down and Hawkins. So that's why you see in season 1, when she's pushed through the wall, she goes to Hawkins, or sorry, she goes to the Upside Down and then can come back into Hawkins through that wall and all that goop. Henry, whenever he becomes Vecna, he can only access Dimension X and the Upside Down. Will and Holly can access all three. So that's going to be key when I tell you in just a couple of minutes what's going to happen in the end. But essentially, every character, it's not about being perfect. It's about, do you go through that journey and do you come full circle? So like Dustin's a great example. You'd say he's ultimately good, but he had to go through the journey of, you know, he's angry because Eddie was killed. So you seeing his grief pop up in a lot of ways, and he was doing some arguably bad stuff to the popular kids within season 5. He was putting a snake in their locker room, blah, blah, blah. He was always good before that, but because of grief and because of some things that were deep down, you know, he was like, all of a sudden, that core 4 who were always bullies, always bullied, became bullies. Right. So every character has to go through that arc and has to go through that journey and has to come full circle, you know, is essentially. So that's why, you know, like, and no one can step in for the other person, meaning, and everyone has to go through that journey for themselves, and everyone can be good and everyone can be bad. And sometimes it's a moment by moment thing. So you'll see people wearing red and blue, but usually if they're acting in their pre-character, it's blue. And then if they're acting in their positive character, they're in red. So Steve, for instance, in season 5 is in all red. Jonathan hasn't gone through his character arc yet, so he's in all blue. So when they're climbing up that tower, I mean, go back and look at it. It's wild, wild. Every single scene, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and every single character is what they're wearing. The only case of it being different is essentially if a character hasn't essentially become a person yet, they'll be wearing all rainbow colors. So all of the kids in the rainbow room, essentially they had a blank white identity. So they aren't picking good or bad yet. Right. So Dustin is an example of that. Holly's an example of that. Alev is an example of that. But all of it, eventually we all have to come into the game and decide who we want to be. Right. And it usually starts with acting in all the wrong and doing all the wrong ways and, you know, yada, yada, yada. So I almost think the parallel with sales reps is the exact same thing. I almost quit sales because, you know, I was top of the leaderboard for one of the methodologies. And I'm like, it's just manipulation, trying to get them to think something, believe something, say something, admit something, blah, blah, blah. So I can bend their opinions so that, or even batting based on being human or empathetic, just so that they like you, just so that they buy. You know, it's all the same thing, but in the end, it's like, where are you? And are you choosing to lean into the good? So that is the 4th theme. Okay, 4th theme on cold email, personalization versus relevance. I'm going to be as fast as I can. I'm going to try and sum up within the next 10 minutes. Personalization versus relevance. It is crazy to me. I came out with personalization at scale back in 2019. And I feel like in the market, I've seen nothing but misdefinitions since. Personalization and relevance, how they're different. There's no such thing as hyper personalization. Personalization means one-to-one. Relevance means one-to-many, no matter how big the group is. People who attended a webinar, people who went to an event, people who have a marketing buyer persona. It's a cohort. Whereas personalization is one-to-one. If I can send one message to one person and a second person, that means it's relevance. There's a lot of different types of relevance, but personalization is I can only send it to this person. They said this, they did this. That is the ultimate pattern interrupt, and that cannot be faked. No matter what platform tells you what about personalization. They're like, I can do personalization stuff. I can say, hey, you're based in Dallas, go Mavericks. I'm like, still relevance, people who are based in Dallas. But true personalization, you know one fact about them, you know one thing, you go to their website and realize their demo requests, their demo request button is taking 8 days for them to get back to you. They made a transition into this role from this company 3 months ago. They said this comment, they said this thing. That is the ultimate pattern interrupt. So I've seen a lot, and I have a huge heart for this. I'm going to be as short as I can. I've seen gimmick after gimmick after gimmick after gimmick after gimmick after gimmick after gimmick, especially on cold calls. Hey, do you want to roll the dice, or do you want to hang up on me now? If I told you this is a cold call, would you throw it in the river, or would you throw your phone away? And every single time I see a positive representation of this, now people who are not trainers are probably going to be listening to this and saying, amen. Like, meaning in the market, they'll be like, listen to this cold call. See, it was a great opener because the prospect laughed. I'm like, yeah, they laughed, but then what? Number one, you're nowhere if they laugh. They didn't hang up. But what about all the other people? I'm like, they think we're sleazy. They think that we're manipulative. They think that we're going to do these gimmicks. A great example is someone hangs up on you and you call them back. I think we got disconnected. I am sorry, y'all. That is malevolent. That's manipulative. It's a lie. That is being the exact type of sales rep that we are known for. And then being like, why do people think that we're sleazy? I'm like, we are. Subject line whenever it's not a reply, intro when it's not an intro. I was really impressed by your profile when you didn't even look at their profile. Or here's another one in the intro. This is a cold call, but it's a well-researched one. I want to train buyers to say, oh yeah, what research? And watch them drown. That it's like, you didn't research me. I reach out to you specifically and I'm like, oh yeah, based on what? Name one fact about me. And I'm like, in the end, gimmicks will never work ultimately. And I'm so glad about that. Getting a prospect to laugh. You're not a gesture or what a jester. You're not a clown. You're not there to make them laugh. You're not there to be their friend. You're not there to be human and empathetic. You are there to find things that they don't know and make their world better by identifying crap that they were going to run into if they hadn't have run into you because they simply put did not know. That is sales. We have got to put down the rest. And there is a million different forms of it. COI selling, trying to get them to calculate out the cost of an action so that they, get scared to move forward. But that's your focus, and your North Star is getting them to think something or realize something, or pain-based selling. Why? So they say it out loud. Oh my gosh, that would hurt me a lot. So they move forward. I'm like, we have got to put that bag down. Now, I have a lot of empathy for sellers and for SDRs. They're just doing what they're taught, and they're just doing, in a lot of case scenarios, what they're told. But personalization, when you know one fact about them and you start to get to know them, and when you know their buyer persona at large, that's when you can be helpful. So personalization is pattern interruptive. Here's the thing. Even though I came out with personalization 2019, I've never seen it done before. I had never seen it done before. I'm like, this is, I need to put this in the market. So I didn't. A lot of people, came at me with sticks. They're like, well, you can't personalize to everyone. And, like B2C, I'm like, I never said that you should. You shouldn't personalize, or what are you going to talk about? The school that I went to, I'm like, I never said you should do that either. I said you should hook it. But the point is that personalization it is going to be pattern interruptive. However, I laid off of it from a training perspective, and here's why. I know it works. And so if it works to get a hold of someone's attention, but they didn't know the buyer persona, meaning they don't know the metrics of how someone's metric, they don't know how to diagnose, they didn't know for an IT director what network latency is appropriate. Over 200 milliseconds, you got a problem with server uptime. Less than 100 milliseconds is average. If I don't know the average backup success rate, if I don't even know that they're measured on server uptime, then I didn't want to help people pattern interrupt, because it gets them into a place where prospects start listening to them. And I was scared that the prospect does listen to them and they don't know enough to give them good advice, and it might hurt the buyer. So I didn't talk about personalization that heavily, because I'm like, my fear is that it works. The person pays attention to you and you don't know enough, and that your goal is just to manipulate them. But if you do know that stuff, if you don't know that stuff, you need to start there. You cannot talk to a CIO unless you know what a CIO is metric on. You shouldn't, and I think that people have a natural litmus test or natural alarm in their body that they're like, I don't want to interrupt someone's day. And I'm like, I believe that's your body and your conscious telling you of like, we don't have anything of value to offer them. We're just trying to sell to them. And I'm like, that's correct. Lean into that. But start to study the things that would make you valuable to your buyer. So when you you're not interrupting them anymore. I never feel like I'm interrupting a buyer anymore. That I'm like, if someone's going to walk into the street and I pull them back by the collar, you would never see that as interrupting while you're helping them. So the problem, the culprit in this situation is we know we're not helping them. We're just trying to sell to them. Right? So if your goal is truly, I want to help them, whether they work with me or not, if nothing else, now they know this problem exists. So now whether they decide to solve it, whether they believe that this was the root cause and it's not, I come to them to deck with that information. I ask 2 questions, understand what they believe and why they believe that, and then realize that it's not true, and I blow that up. Whether they work with me or not is, beside the fact. I've just helped them. That our conscious is like, I have no problem bashing in and being like, hey, asking these 2 questions. Why? Because it's helping you. Right? So the problem is, is that our real agenda? Can we help? Do we know the information to? And is that our real agenda? Once you have that on your side, personalization is only going to be to your benefit. So it's either something that someone said, or if you're going to do problem-centric personalization, which I always suggest, is if you can find the problem on an outside data point. You can't in all case scenarios, which I'm going to get into an example of how you can do that. But you can in all case scenarios. So let's say, I hypothetically, I could solve for conversion to close one, and it's a private company. And so I don't have any of their numbers. I can't get the data point out of, are they missing quota? So I have to ask a certain amount of questions. But if you can from the outside, meaning there are a certain amount of problems that you can look at indicators on the outside. Think about those. What are those? What are the ambient direction around those? Of like server uptime, for instance. You can tell server uptime. Why? You research it, right? Of what it is for them in specific. That kind of personalization is always going to win. Even in absence of that, knowing one thing that they said, one thing that they have in their profile, it's going to interrupt the pattern so much to where they're all of a sudden going to pay attention to you. The sad thing is, and I'm saying this from a data perspective, and I promise I'm going to move on. The average open rate is 15 to 25%. The average reply rate is 0.5 to 0.7%. Not positive reply rate, just reply rate at all. And one of the main pieces behind that is because people are defaulting to language of just following up, just circling back, just following this to the top of your inbox. Happy Monday. Hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. My name is blank. We're the #1 blank who helps blank do blank. Here are 3 different profiles. Da, da, da. And the reason they're doing that is the absence of actual research on the person. There's a theory around there of you should only personalize to enterprise. I'm like, net, the math is very freaking clear. And I would have any trainer who is saying the opposite, I would love to go live with you. The math is very clear. Personalization does work, period. The templates that I hand over, the thing that I was going to nauseatingly say is I sell templates as a part of my training. And it has, and I'm only saying this, hold your stomach for a second. The industry average open rate is 15 to 25, and average reply rate is 0.5 to 0.7. These have an average of 65 to 85% open rate and a 15 at minimum reply rate. 15%. I'm not saying that so that everyone's like, oh, awesome. I'm saying that because even 80% of the messaging is written by me. 10% is personalization, which I teach people how to do. And 10% is based on buyer persona, which we workshop. So these messages, regardless of the level of relevance, because that's what we workshop, right? That's done like, that's what we workshop across the training. Irregardless of the level of relevance, in the worst case scenario, gets a 15% reply rate. Why? Personalization, right? Personalization. That's it. That is the differentiator in that front line. So like any kind of, you can't send more than 50 emails a day anyway, otherwise you start causing email deliverability problems. So I'm like, that first line, something that they did, something that they said. And a lot of times whenever you research them and you're finding that thing, I suggest 5 minutes to find 3 premises that will feed the entire sequence. That's it. Don't get lost. Don't, find out where the kids go to school. Find out those 3 premises. I have 5 different buckets online. If you want to go, if you go to flipthescript.com, click written, it's all free. And there's a personalization buckets on all the different premises. Bucket 1's the best. Bucket 5 is the worst, and the higher up the list, the better in terms of conversion rates. But the only differentiator in those emails, hypothetically, in that first line, is that it requires personalization. So it's like, and you can get out very easily 50, 60 emails a day, right? And anything more than 50, you're going to hurt yourself. So knowing one fact about them, not just for enterprise, it's not like people work at a mid-market company and they don't like you knowing who they are. And then all of a sudden they get to an enterprise company. It's like, oh, now I want you to know, it requires a line. A lot of times whenever you're doing that research, you notice something that qualifies them for something else or disqualifies them from even reaching out. So personalization is 1-to-1, relevance is 1-to-many. And regardless of what table or software, they cannot do personalization at scale. Why? Because you need to write the hook. How do you write the hook of what's personal, what you're personalizing on to what is relevance? So that is bucket 4, or email topic number 4, is personalization and relevance. I would require one fact about them in that front line. Then we're going to go into the end, how to hook it. Okay, Stranger Things, fact number 5, the redemption arc of Henry. This is a fun one. Okay, history of the redemption arc, long and the short of it, Henry is going to be the good guy in the end. People are probably going to want to throw tomatoes at me. The good news is I don't have men today, so I don't even know what people are saying in the comments. Are y'all all booing me or throwing tomatoes at this point? Okay, so hear me out. Henry in the beginning wasn't bad. He was just a little kid who wandered into a cave. So essentially what happens in the first shadow is they go into a origin story. Hopper, Karen Wheeler, Ted Wheeler, Radio Shack Bob, Joyce all went to school together with Henry. Radio Shack Bob has a half sister. He's white, she's half black. Their dad is white. And essentially the story that's gone into is that he was a president or the principal of school, and he had fun times. He copulated with a student, and who that student was in the end was Ella Fitzgerald, who sings Dream Another Dream of Me. So essentially Radio Shack Bob has a half sister named Patty Newby. Who I believe Patty is now is Miss Kelly, the therapist. And who I believe her son is Patrick. Out of the 4 people the deaths that caused Gates, Frank, Chrissy, Max, and Patrick, he was basically the friend of Jason who suffered some abuse at home. I believe that that's very likely Miss Kelly's son. The reason that I believe that is because Miss Kelly was talking to 3 out of the 4 victims about their trauma, and Patrick, she wasn't. And I believe it's because they were addressing it at home. However, Miss Kelly, the reason that I believe that she's Patty Newby, well, part of the reason is she has a clock around her neck, or a necklace that's a clock that's a key. Because back in the day, which they go into this in season 5, when Max went back in time, Joyce was handing out a playbill So in the first shadow, Joyce was the director essentially of a play, and she cast Henry and Patty Newby, who is Radio Shack Bob's half sister, as the main leads. Patty and Henry fell in love. And Henry, because of that love, wanted to help Patty figure out who her mom was because she didn't know at the time. So whenever Henry was in Nevada originally, he wandered into a cave, touched some of that cave equipment, not knowing what it was, went to Dimension X, got Mind Flayer into his blood, and then it was immediately transported back. It gave him a certain amount of powers, but he wasn't bad. So because he loved Patty, he wanted to find her mother. So what he did is he went into the void and he levitated in his attic. Victor Creel, which I don't believe is Henry's dad, but Victor Creel and Patty's dad walked into the attic and thought that he was doing something wrong. Just like how when Jason walked into the attic and thought Max levitating, there was something wrong. He was like, get her down or I'm going to kill you. He's like, this is demonic. This is satanic. But all he was looking for was Patty's mom, and he found her, essentially. So that is why he was villainized and basically chased out of the town. Now, when he came back the night of the play, Joyce saw him and said, I know everything. And what she meant by that was that him and Patty were in love. But what Henry misunderstood that to be was that she knew about what happened in the attic. So Henry at that point was like, Joyce is the devil. She's team bad guy. She's like basically part of the crew that wants to chase me out of the town, just like they chase Eddie out of the town. So that is kind of the backstory. And then Henry is shortly thereafter given over to Dr. Brenner. And then he is basically trapped and in that lab. He tries to do something for 11, and he thought it was all, like genuinely all good of like, you know, he's like, these are the people that were trying to kill you, 11. And he stood up for her. And he had always been, you know, pushed out of the town for something A, he didn't do, and number 2, wasn't demonic. Then 11 pushes him through the wall. So that's why he turned into Vecna. He was like, well, screw this. All of these good people in the town are the ones that aren't even looking for understanding and basically demonizing me for something I didn't do, something that I didn't do wrong. So in the end, the reason that I believe that there is going to be a redemption arc is because Will and Holly are what are known as shadow walkers. Will is a sorcerer and Holly is a cleric. So, but both of them can go to all 3 worlds, Dimension X, Upside Down, and Hawkins. So where Max is in Henry's mind and where Holly is also in Henry's mind is in Dimension X, right? So 11, that's why she can't find them. So that big thick wall that's a circle, that is the wall, I believe, around Dimension X. So that's why she can't get through it, because keep in mind, 11 can only go to Hawkins and Upside Down. Vecna can only go to Upside Down and to Dimension X. So thus the problem. The bad guy is not Henry. The bad guy is the Mind Flayer. And what the Mind Flayer wants is to get into Hawkins. So he's got a problem. So when Henry turned away from him and he became Vecna, he was thinking, if all these people hate me, then surely, you know, I'm going to be accepted by the Mind Flayer. I'm going to turn bad. I'm going to break bad. But in the end, the Mind Flayer just uses who's the best tool. Henry believes that they're tight and that they're one and the same. But the Mind Flayer controls and uses whoever is best. And Henry is not the best tool because he can't get into Hawkins using Henry or using Vecna. He can only get into Hawkins using Will. So I believe the reason there's going to be a redemption arc is that, and you're already seeing Will start to break bad, meaning Will's a vessel at this point. He can be filled with good. He can be filled with bad. In season 2, he's filled with the Mind Flayer and he basically killed a whole bunch of cops, or he can be filled with, you know, so on and on we go here. So I believe that in the end, the Mind Flayer is going to throw Vecna away. And he's going to say, I'm going to use Will. And that's where it's going to click for Henry. The Mind Flayer doesn't love me. But who does love me, which keep in mind, Henry believed that Patty died. in the first shadow. He's unaware that she's still alive. She is still alive, but Henry believed that she had died. So I believe that the mind flayer is going to start using Will, you know, so that he can accomplish his goal of, like, again, Will transported the Demogorgon and Vecna and, you know, on, and he's consumed with the mind flayer, the hive mind, all of it. But I believe it's the mind flayer is going to throw away Vecna, and he's going to start using Will. Vecna is going to realize that, and love is always what breaks the spell. Essentially, that's what Mike was saying to 11 whenever he was like, I'm scared of losing you and I love you. Patty Newby in the first shadow basically says, I love you. And that's what brings Henry back from levitating. So I believe he's going to realize that the mind flayer doesn't love me, but who does love me, he's going to find out that Patty is still alive, who is Miss Kelly, and who does love him, who has a key to his heart, because there's a little clock. Sorry, I'm getting goosebumps. A little clock necklace around her neck. That's the key. And the reason that she's so focused on students with trauma is because of the history with Henry. And also, you have to keep in mind, her dad was the principal at Hawkins who slept with a student. So she's trying to right that wrong. She's a good character. And she's also a character who loved Henry. I believe he's going to find out that she's still alive, and he's going to come back to the good side. Okay. One more on email, and then I'm going to tell you how it all ends and equip, and then we're done. Okay, the last thing that I would think about in terms of cold email, we've done email deliverability, subject lines, how to get them to read it, metric, and personalization versus relevance. You have to use a line of personalization in the subject line too. I would use 2 words of, like, you said, you know, and then it helps you have different subject lines, so it helps with deliverability. So the last topic I wanted to talk about is, and I'm going to be very quick about this, metric-based relevance. It does not matter. I'm just being candid because I can't even see the comments now, or right now anyway. Maybe that's what's given me the spice too. It doesn't matter what permission-based opener you use. It doesn't matter what subject line you have. It doesn't matter what kind of X, Y, and Z. It like all of that is, it matters because it can withhold, it can prevent you from getting to the relevance portion. But it doesn't matter to the tune of, even if you get them to listen, even if I ensure that they get the email with deliverability, and they open the email with the subject line, and that they read the email with my text and aesthetic and pattern interrupts and acronyms and blah, blah, blah. Once they're reading it, once they're listening on that cold call, if you are not relevant, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. That's why I have so much grief with a lot of trainers just like me, of like, the permission-based opener is not the hard part. Getting them to laugh, even though I don't think it's certainly not necessary. I think it puts their head in the wrong mindset, and it's gimmicky, and you're going to churn people. Of like, I constantly see these trainers getting hung up on, of the person's like, you know, they say a gimmick or whatever. They're like, Happy St. Patty's Day, and they're like, go screw, you know, they hang up. But even if you get to that portion, the hard part is what comes next. Not only in terms of the elevator pitch, but in terms of the questions that you're asking. So here's my, in 2 minutes, my summary. Your buyer persona, what's relevant to them is what's based on 2 things: their metrics and things that they don't know. If you don't know the metrics for your buyer persona, the lagging indicators, which is the final metric they're hired and fired to drive, their leading indicators and their leading indicators, use AI. And if you go on my profile, there's a bunch of different prompts you can use, but I'd say, give me the top 3 lagging indicators for blank, which is buyer persona, the industry average of that, at what point they cause, what point it's a problem. Then I'd say, once they give you back the lagging indicator, let's say for CFO, for instance, it's gross profit margin. For IT director, it is server uptime. For CISO, it's number of security breaches. Once you have that, say, give me the top 20 leading or leaning or coincidental indicators of what causes an increase or decrease with blank, let's say CFO, with the gross profit margin for a CFO. What is the industry average of them? And at what point do they cause a problem with decrease in gross profit margin for a CFO, for instance? So let's do an IT director, or let's do a head of payments, one we haven't done yet. Transaction success rate is what they're measured on. So I'd say, give me the top 20 leading and coincidental indicators that drive a decrease, that cause a decrease in transaction success rate. What's the industry average of those KPIs, and at what point they cause a problem with a decrease in transaction success rate? Memorize that. So then when you ask a person, you have to keep in mind, especially if you're going outbound, meaning they weren't doing something before you called them. So an object at rest stays at rest. If you call them, even if they give you details about that pain, they're not going to move on it. Industry average conversion for inbound is 35%. Industry average conversion for outbound is 6%. Because inbound, they're already convinced that they have a problem. Outbound, they aren't, even if they give you the details of that pain. So it's a little jarring that I'm like, one of the main problems, I believe, and again, we are falling victim to everything that's been taught in the past, is like, you're like, we work with people who struggle with blank, blank, and blank. Are you running into any of that? And I'm like, yo, even if they are struggling with blank, blank, and blank, you're going outbound, which means even if they admit to that and they do identify with that profile, it's something that they will not solve. Very likely. They might jump on the phone to, kick the tires to see if one day, if it does become relevant, if it does become something or so, how would they do it? But that's all they're going to do. So in that elevator pitch, my two, the elevator pitch and the questions, my two pushes, you have to be specific. Instead of saying we work with people with low open rates, we work with people with open rates below 50. So they can identify with it. And you have to describe them from a character perspective with objective indicators. People who are sub 50% of quota, who have a sub 50% cold email open rate, meaning they have an email deliverability problem that they didn't know about that needs to be addressed first before they think about quality. That I can I identify with that. Instead of saying, do I have a low open rate? That's, what's low? They have to interpret your version of whatever you think low is. So if you're like, we work with people who struggle with blank, blank, and blank, and it's like low open rates, long sales cycle, they're frustrated on the cold calls, bad cold call scripts. Are you one of those? It's like, if they do have a bad cold call script and they knew that, they would have done something about it, right? So that elevator pitch needs to be tight on the indicators that show you they have a problem, which means that they hypothetically didn't know that they had a problem. And then the second piece of that is the questions that you ask them after that. You have to keep in mind the goal of that elevator pitch and those questions is finding something that buyer didn't know. If you don't find one of those and fast, there's no reason for them to jump on that call. That's why the industry is in the crapper. That is why its industry average is 1 to 2 meetings booked per month on outbound. Some cases it's 0, is because people are going after, do you identify with this profile, which is something they already know about? Are you struggling with blank? And if they do identify with that profile, it means that they won't move forward. Object at rest stays at rest. You call them and you're like, do you struggle with this? They're like, yeah, but it's not that bad. But if I find something new, it catapults them into action. So the questions that I would ask are always after you memorize. So get those 2 lists, memorize those lists. And instead of saying, do you have a problem with network latency affecting server uptime? Again, if they knew and they're correct, they would have already done something about it. So them not doing something about it is communication that from their perspective, it is not bad enough to solve. So instead of asking that, I'd be like, what's your network latency, if you don't mind me asking? They're like, it's actually really good. And you're like, what's really good, if you don't mind? If you don't mind. They're like, it's 400 milliseconds. I'm like, found one. I'm like, interesting. They're like, what's interesting? I'm like, industry average is less than 100, but anything over 200, it causes an 18% increase in server downtime. And they're like, what? And they lean in because they should. You found one that they didn't know. So after you memorize that list, your entire elevator pitch are for that persona. You don't solve 3 business problems overall. It's 3 per persona. The root cause latched to the leading indicator, the tactical problem latched to the leading indicator, and the business problem attached to the lagging indicator. If you're going off of business problem alone and lagging indicator, you're like, we work with people who want to lose weight. You have no credibility. We work with people who can't hit quota. You have no credibility. If I find a tactical problem, then I'm like, how many emails are you sending per day, if you don't mind me asking? They're like 200. I'm like, if you have in my head, I'm like, already, I'm like, they have deliverability problems for sure. I'm like, what's your open rate, if you don't mind me asking? And they're like 10. I'm like, interesting. They're like, what's interesting? I'm like, well, industry average is 15 to 25, but anything less than 50% open rate, it's an email deliverability problem, meaning at bare minimum, 41% of your emails aren't even making it to the primary inbox. And I shut up, right? So I would avoid subjective questions, any kind of adjective, good, bad, high, low, increase, decrease. And I constantly hear this. We work with ineffective processes, and people who have manual blah. That is not your claim to fame. That is not the problem that you solve. The problem that you solve is always attached to their indicators in specific. So CTO is going to have different business problems to solve than a CFO is going to have different business problems to solve than a head of payments. Sales and sales enablement, the reason that they don't value the same things is that they're not metric the same. Sales is on close one ARR. Sales enablement is on training product adoption, time to full ramp, or time to first deal. So they're going to value a problem. A problem is in the presence of a metric, right? So once I know those metrics, my elevator pitch should not only be anchored to those, but it should be giving them an actual bandwidth that they can identify. People don't say, do you have this disease that you don't know? They're like, are you over the age of 30, live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and have 2 siblings or more? If so, you might have blank. So even if you just wanted to write a relevant template only, and then I'm going to go into the last Stranger Things we're going to close out. Even if you wanted to write a relevance only template, meaning you don't know something personalized about them, great way that you can do it is this. Like, hi blank, and you're like, if you don't mind me asking, either what's your open rate, or is the open rate below 50%? The reason that I ask is anything below 50 and it causes a 41% increase in email deliverability problems and a 60% decrease in quota attainment. If you do me a favor, go look it up, see what it is. And if it's anywhere below this, give me 15. If it's anything above blank, I'll leave you alone. If it's anything below this, give me 15 minutes, or at minimum, you can walk away with a couple of things you can do about it, whether you want to talk to me after that or not. So the pitch is that you're going to help them solve their problem, whether they work with you or not, but how they identify that they have that problem, because you have to keep in mind, you are creating demand. That is what you're doing in outbound. If you're just attracting demand, it makes sense why the numbers are in the crapper, right? There's creating demand and attracting demand. Attracting demand is they already know that they have a problem, and you're trying to get them to solve it with you, evaluate solving with you. You have zero credibility in this instance. Every other seller is in this instance, and you only have 3 to 5% of your market in this instance. Creating demand is you're creating a new need because you're creating a new problem to solve, not because you're making up a problem that doesn't exist, but you're finding a problem that does exist, but they didn't know about. The land of what they don't know is the only way you will book appointments. It does not matter what permission-based opener, it doesn't matter if you mirror their tone, or you say the right couple of words, or what matters, once you get past that, the only thing that matters is relevance. And that is a massive bucket of where I see, people of like, they get through the permission-based opener or whatever, and the prospect, go ahead and pitch. And they're like, do you have low open rates, blah, blah, blah? Or are you going to tell me that you're perfect at everything? I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a leading. So I would look up their metrics. No subjective questions, no adjectives or adverbs, low, high, good, bad, blah, blah. Digital questions. Do you have a problem with blank? Again, if it was big enough to solve, then they would have done something about it. If it's not big enough to solve and they can identify with that, then it means they're not going to move forward. They might book a meeting, but they're going to be a tire kicker. Any kind of profile mapping of like, we work with people who do blank and blank and blank, like we work with people who struggle with blank and blank and blank. Is that you, or did you, or am I, or are you going to tell me that you're doing it perfect? I even heard some training of like, you know, the person's like, oh, we're all good on cold calls. And they're like, let me ask you a quick question. Let me ask you a cheeky question. Are you saying that there's nothing that you couldn't do better? And I'll just hear these prospects hang up. Because they know where you're going. Like, that is not valuable to a prospect, is you challenging that and making them think, oh, maybe I could do it better. I mean, I guess in some weird land that doesn't exist, maybe that worked one time. I think probably because the person was confused. It is, do you get to something that they didn't know through your questions from a data perspective? If you don't have that, I think that your assumption of I shouldn't call them because I'm interrupting their day and I'm bothering them is correct. You shouldn't. You are bothering them. Why? Because you don't know anything that they don't know, and you're not asking the question. That's not the goal of the conversation. I believe that 100% you are bothering them. I wouldn't make a single call. 42% of SDRs believe, 89% of prospects are proactively dissatisfied with what they hear on a cold call. But 92% of buyers value the process, sales process, more than the product itself. So people are like, pick one. Do you not want us, or do you want to talk to us? I'm like, they hypothetically want value from a seller, but they don't get. They want the prospect, the SDR to find something they don't know, but they don't get it. But 42% of SDRs believe that they don't have enough information before they reach out to the person. And I'm like, then start there. We've got to start there. If you know that much, I guarantee the problem isn't that you're not looking in the mirror and doing self-affirmations. The problem is we don't know anything. That's the problem. The symptom that we don't want to call people, that is correct. The thing that needs to change is our knowledge level. Then we're confident ourselves that when I call this person, I can find something fast that even if they don't work with me or don't work with me, it's still a valuable interaction. So the thing that has to change is the knowledge on those metrics. And good news is you learned 3 tonight. It is that fast. I have gone from a world of, it always bugged me. You know, people will be like, hey, can you give me an example in my terms? Every trainer under the sun is going to be like, that's like asking me to train in French one day, you know, Korean the next day, German the next day. It can't be done. I'm like, well, it has to be done because we're trained, like they can't adopt it without. So I'm like, how can we do this? So I broke it down into a system, simply put, so I could give all the questions that they could ask in terms of their buyer persona alone. And if I can do that for 60 different buyer personas, different training, different team, different buyer, if I can do that, I promise you, it is a easier jump than you think. You learn 3 metrics, sadly, you're great in comparison. You learn 5, you're even better. You learn 10, you learn 20, you're going to start to get deadly, especially in competitive deals. Okay, last thing, how it all ends. This is how it's going to end. So interview. Joyce is going to die. Joyce is going to die. Steve's not going to die. There's going to be a positive hive mind. The counter's a negative. That it's going to be based on communication. Dustin and Steve are going to make up because they're going to realize that we just need to talk to each other. Dustin was being mean, because he was going through grief, and then he's going to say, I'm sorry. That's always the key, is that they say, I'm sorry, and they talk it out and look to understand. Dr. Brenner is 000. He's also the father of 8, 11, 1, and I believe Nancy Wheeler. Ted is a U.S. spy. Murray is a Russian spy. Red and blue, pay attention to it. Henry's going to have a complete redemption arc, and in the end, this is what I believe is going to happen. Henry's going to have a redemption arc. Him, 8, and 11 are all 3 going to work together. People are going to hate me. Work together to put the Mind Flayer back in the box in Dimension X and close the gate. And then Hawkins, that's their bad name. Just like Maxine is the bad name. Max or Jane is a bad name. It's L. Or Michael is a bad name. It's Mike. Or Harrington, Harrington is the sweet name as opposed to Steve. Or, like on and on we go. Hawkins is the bad name. The right side up is the good name. So the reason I believe this is there's one scene in season 4 where everyone will remember this scene. There's a basketball game going on, and there's Dungeons and Dragons going on with Eddie, and Eddie is playing quote unquote back then. There's the team. They both get down to the wire. And basically, the clan huddles and they're like to the death. They know that they have to roll a perfect 20 to beat Vecna. And over here that they have to make a basket. So Jason says, give me the ball. Jason takes a shot and he bricks it. He bricks it. And Dustin rolls the dice and he rolls an 11. And Eddie's like, it's a miss. And then Erica gets the dice and Lucas Sinclair, her brother, gets the ball and pivots. He makes a shot. Erica rolls the dice and rolls a 20. He wins, or they win, they win. So the reason I believe that this for sure is going to happen, the reason I knew Callie was going to come back is on Lucas's jersey was an 8. And I'm like, uh-oh, spaghetti. Oh, Callie's coming back for sure. So that's why I knew, that's why I said that before season 5 went live. I'm like, for sure, Billy's not coming back. It's sacrificial death. Eddie's not coming back. It's a sacrificial death. But who has to come back is Callie. Because it has to be 11 isn't strong enough. That's what that dice roll meant. But then if you add 8 plus 11 is not 20, it's 19. So you only need 1. So who that 1 has to be is it has to be Henry. You have to keep in mind, Henry was not bad. Henry wasn't bad. All of it, people just chased him off and didn't understand him. Just like they did Eddie. They're like, Hellfire's a cult. So the entire theme of Stranger Things, what it means, is what's strange is not upside down. What's stranger is Hawkins, and that everyone thinks that they're good and that those monsters are bad. You have to keep in mind, Dart did something great, even though Dustin pushed him into that thing. And even though he's a demo dog, he let them by. Everyone has the ability to do both. It's just which one do you do? And next time it looks a certain way, do you look to understand them or do you just blame them and keep moving? So it's not about comparison. I'm better than this person. Yeah, I did something bad, but they did something worse. It's about focusing on it's not about being perfect. It's about when you do, apologizing, restoring that bond, and the next time trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Eddie isn't bad, even though he looks at, maybe Hellfire's not a cult and Dungeons & Dragons is just a game. Maybe Henry's not bad. In the beginning, he wasn't. So that's what's going to happen in the end. Henry's going to have a redemption arc. Callie and 11 are going to work together. 11 right now wants to kill Henry because she doesn't know. So she has to go through that arc. She's started to, in the beginning, she was wearing rainbow. Now she's wearing red and blue. Sometimes she's in the blue. Why? Because she's just at that stage. She's going to have to go full circle, see in Henry that he isn't bad. And they're all 3 going to have to work together. So the counter to the Mind Flayer just wants to infect minds one by one by one by one by one by one by one to overcome the group. But he needs everybody. Just like the good needs everybody. They need everyone in that chain, everyone in that positive hive mind. So Henry is included in that. So Henry is going to be the last one to turn, and that is going to be the key. And they're all going to overthrow Dimension X, or they're going to overthrow the Mind Flayer together and put him back in the cage in Dimension X, and the series is going to end. That is my prediction. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. Sorry about the rough start. Shout out to Min. Min, your job is much harder than I thought. I was very confused. We were 7 minutes late. And I'm still not sure this is recording. I really hope that it is. Otherwise, it's going to really bum me out that I was talking for that long. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm going to do 2 more of these, sadly enough, if you didn't get enough today. So episodes 5 through 7 come out on Christmas Day. Sorry, December 25th. I'm going to do 1 episode after that to recap what happened in episode 5 through 7. It's going to be a big fat I told you so. I'm just kidding. Maybe it is. I hope it is. Meaning I hope that that's the end of the story. But I am going to cry about Joyce. And then the final episode comes out New Year's Eve on the 31st, December 31st. And actually, there's someone online who I'm not going to tell you who it is yet, who oddly enough, I can't believe this is happening. They bought a ticket to fly here to watch the movie. So it's in movie theaters as well. They're both going live at 7 o'clock on Netflix and in movie theaters. they're only going to have it in movie theaters for one night and then never again. So your girl obviously woke up in the middle of the night and got tickets. And so someone who is in the sales community is flying all the way from Maine to come and watch the movie with me. So I'm going to watch it twice. I'm going to watch it at 7 p.m. and then I'm going to watch it at 10:15 with this person. However, there's going to be 2 more episodes of this. I'm always going to have sales topics linked to it. So, either way, hopefully you can get some value. I'm going to do one after the basically episodes 5 through 7, and then one after the grand finale. So that's it. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope that you do not have a nutcracker that looks like this. That has been scaring me from square one. My name's Beck, not Min. Toodaloo.